University of Richmond's campus spans over 350 acres and was voted the nation's most beautiful campus by the Princeton Review in 2020. There are a variety of natural landscapes found on campus, notably the West Hampton Lake and Little West Ham Creek, which cuts through the newly refurbished Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor.
There are numerous plant and tree species interspersed throughout the Eco Corridor. While being a remarkable landscape, there are some invasive plant species that have infiltrated the area. We interviewed a local resident who frequently visits the Eco Corridor to gain some insight into public knowledge about the invasive species present.
How often do you come through the university's corridor?
I think I come almost daily, especially after the classes. It helps me to feel better about my day and reflect on everything that has happened during the day.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you believe that this eco corridor is well kept and well managed?
Yeah, I definitely think that the Eco Corridor is well made and well managed because I see that everything is really neat and appropriate for me to just enjoy the nature around. And what I like most about it is that it's natural, although we have some artificial parts here too. But at the same time, I can hear birds singing, I can hear a river running, and it just helps me settle down and relax.
Perfect. Now, are you aware of some of the invasive species that are in the eco corridor presently?
Unfortunately, I'm not, but when I was walking here, I saw a little sign on the tree, and it said that there was some special species tree. But I would love to know more about it.
A dedicated team of landscape ecologists sought out to create a 5-year plan for managing the invasive species in the Eco Corridor.
We went out into the Eco Corridor to assess the landscape for areas and instances where we saw invasive plant species. We were able to successfully locate Chinese privet mostly near the pavement path closest to the golf course. Another very common and dense invasive species we found was English ivy, growing both on the ground and up the trees in the forest.
Katrina Lamb, Invasive Species Management Coordinator with Conservation Services, a provisioner of conservation services for the university, shared her insight on English ivy, informing us of its ability to grow under as well as over vegetation, sucking nutrients from them in the process. Additionally, English ivy produces runners or clone growths from its parent root, making this root in particular difficult to identify in its removal. Katrina also shared information about Chinese privet, another invasive species that emerges at an earlier time than native species, not unlike English ivy. Chinese privet is one of the fastest growing hedges in the world, growing at a rate of 1 to 3 feet per year. While other native hedges grow at a rate of a few inches per year, Chinese privet is easily able to overtake and outcompete native hedges for resources.
One method for removing invasive species is called targeted grazing. In targeted grazing, animals such as goats are used to eat invasive species. This is effective because goats eat everything and can reach up in higher tree regions, ultimately getting rid of the invasive species in the process.
In 2014, Silliman et al. Performed a targeted grazing study in Maryland to clear a prominent invasive plant species, Phragmites Australis. Their study placed 2 goats in experimental and control enclosures that were 8.5 meters by 40 meters, which is a total of 340 meters squared. There were 3 treatment periods lasting about 3 weeks each. Researchers measured stem height, stem density, and plant cover. They found that stem density was reduced by 50%, stem height by 60%, and plant cover was decreased by 5-fold. By the end of the study, there was a significant increase in species richness, specifically 36 different taxa in graze plots versus 20 taxa in the control plots.
Using Google Earth, we traced out the perimeter of the eco corridor that would receive our treatment, which resulted in about 14.41 acres of land. Then, we used this acreage and the results from Silliman and their colleagues and the computational software Mathematica to determine the total goats we would use for the project. We calculated about 342 goats would be necessary to clear the entire eco corridor. Following the same methods in the study, we determined the optimized starting positions of the goats to ensure total clearance of the land. Each dot represents a goat pair, and the red circle is the predicted area a pair could clear. This would ensure a more uniform clearing event and a better chance of receiving close to total invasive species targeting.
The most effective method for getting rid of the invasive species is to have an integrated approach where we use both targeted grazing and an herbicide, glyphosate, to target the invasive species. From discussing with Katrina and Allison, we learned that the goats would cost approximately $11,200 in total, and the glyphosate would cost $345 in total for 14.4 acres. Including all other pricing, the total cost per year would be around $7,600.
We propose a 5-year plan to best manage the invasive species found in the Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor. In year 1, we would implement an integrated treatment approach in which 100% of the acreage is being treated by both targeted grazing by goats and the herbicide, glyphosate. We would begin by introducing the goats in May and have them graze for about 3 weeks. After the end of the 3-week period, the goats would be removed and glyphosate would be used to target any invasive species still visible. This would occur in June and last throughout the summer. In year 2, we would modify the treatment area to 70% of the total acreage for the goats to come back and graze in June. This will be decided by areas where the invasive species may have survived or re-emerged. Here, we are not including glyphosate. In year 3, we would do a single treatment of glyphosate on 50% of the initial acreage in July to follow the previous year of just goats. In year 4, 30% of the initial acreage would be treated with targeted goat grazing and would be introduced in August. Finally, in year 5, 30% of the initial acreage would be targeted with a combination of goats and glyphosate. Similar to year 1, the goats would be introduced in May and glyphosate in June. Our 5-year plan seeks to minimize invasive species occurrence in the eco corridor and allow for the landscape to be reforested with the appropriate species according to plan.